Namaste and welcome to the Bharatvaarta Weekly. I'm Roshan Karipha. I have with me Abhishek Paul and Nirav Kanodra to walk you through the news and events of the week that was. This week, we'll be talking about quite a few things. Rahul Gandhi has undertaken an all India trip. He's calling the Bharat Jodo Yatra. And there was some controversy around his meetings in Tamil Nadu. The Indian and Chinese troops have decided to pull back from a disputed border area. And of course, in the UK, a new prime minister has taken charge. And in the same week, we have the death of Queen Elizabeth as well. And closer home, President Biden has approved a $450 million package to Pakistan as well. All of this and more on this weekly. Hey, Abhishek. Hey, Nirav. How's it going?
All good, all good.
Fantastic to have you guys here. Before we talk about the news for this week, let's discuss the couple of episodes that we put out last week. I think one of my recent favorite episodes was the one featuring Professor Desiraju. He is one of India's most highly cited scientists, and he also has a deep interest in India's civilizational ethos. And the conversation with Sharan Shetty on how our constitution was framed, and what impact it has had in terms of governance and social, cultural, etc. Was really, really fascinating. So definitely check that out. We're also putting out a lot of snippets and shorts on our social media channels as well. Do check it out. And then we had an old friend of Bharatvaarta, Ashish Chandorkar, returning to the podcast, talking about international trade. Abhishek, did you catch this episode?
Yeah, definitely. Ashish episodes are not to be missed, right? So yeah, I think it was a really good episode covering a lot of what entails his current job, right, at the Indian mission in Geneva. So he explained, I think as you said in the conversation, you wanted a sort of view which even people who are laymen could understand, right? And so he explained very nicely the importance of international trade for any economy, how historically countries who are today vocal proponents of free trade, have used various kinds of barriers and tariffs in the past, right, to gain their dominant positions. He also explained a little bit about, the internal
Recording
workings
in progress.
of the WTO, right? Like in terms of how there are typically no votes that happen, right? But everything is often consensus based, but takes a lot of time. So yeah, I think there are many other topics as well. So yeah, I would definitely recommend all those who have interest in this area to check this out.
Yeah, it was a great primer actually. I mean, especially for me. I mean, I've heard bits and pieces of this stuff, right? Whether it's the WTO or the FTAs and the tariffs and so on. It was good to sort of get a very comprehensive perspective on this and how international trade can be such a leverage, right? Especially post COVID. So if you haven't already checked out these episodes, definitely listen to them on your favorite podcast platforms. Also, like always, please like, share, subscribe, rate and review on your favorite podcast platforms. It helps a lot more people discover our content. Thank you so much for all of your support thus far. Moving on to the first piece of news for this week. Rahul Gandhi has undertaken an all India trip he's calling the Bharat Jodo Yatra. The Yatra formally began on September 7th from Kanyakumari in Tamil Nadu and is currently progressing through Kerala's Thiruvananthapuram district. The Yatra will enter Alappuzha on September 17th and pass through Ernakulam district on September 21st and 22nd and reach Thrissur on 23rd. Then it will pass through Palakkad on September 26th and 27th and enter Malappuram on September 28th. Over the course of this Yatra, Mr. Gandhi is looking to gain more allies in opposition parties, particularly leaders like Nitish Kumar and Sharad Pawar. I find this very interesting. Abhishek, I mean, the elections are in 2024, but, we see that, a couple of years before itself, I mean, preparations have started, right? Do you think it's because, I mean, there might be some dispute in terms of who could be the face of the elections in 2024 for the opposition?
Yeah, I think Congress party has got a lot of criticism over the last, let's say, decade, that they have lacked the energy and street presence, and being out there to fight about on various issues, compared to the BJP, right, who are like a 24/7 365 electoral machine, right? So uh, at least this looks like some sort of a new beginning that Rahul Gandhi is doing, right? So this yatra is supposed to cover 12 states and distance of 3,500 kilometers, so which will take like about 5 months. And I mean, they're kind of going from Kanyakumari to Kashmir. So yeah, quite an interesting initiative. Obviously, what we'll get is weekly controversies and hot takes. So I think the last week we had one video that went viral where he was trying to understand about the Holy Trinity from some pastor who has a controversial past. Then his foreign T-shirt also became uh, subject of news and political back and forth. So yeah, I think we will continue to get such kind of headlines every week as he goes along with this yatra. Right now, I guess he's in some sort of home turf, right, where he's himself an MP from Kerala, and the Congress party is somewhat strong there, right? So it will be interesting to see when he goes further up north, like what kind of reactions his party and he gets during this.
Yeah, the meeting with Pastor George Pune, I think, became a huge controversy last week. Some of them were saying that, hey, I mean, his mother is a Catholic, so he should probably know all of this stuff. So they were pretty dumbfounded that he was dumbfounded about some of this stuff, right? Yeah, and I also saw on Twitter that somebody said, he might potentially contest from Kanyakumari, which is 40% Christian demographic. And so, I mean, this was just a way of currying favor perhaps with the constituents, right? So yeah, definitely interesting. But yeah, I mean, good that he started up early, right? I mean, unlike the last time where in between Thailand trips and whatnot, I mean, he somehow found time to campaign. Right, all right, moving on. Both the Indian and Chinese troops have pulled back from a disputed border area in the Himalayas. High-level peace talks that began after the 2020 clashes have finally proved fruitful, as forces have now disengaged in the Gogra hot springs area. The two defense ministries confirmed troops were disengaging from respective sides in the area of Gogra hot springs, in a move conducive to the peace and tranquility in the border areas. India is still on war footing with the neighboring giant. Even as the two armies have currently disengaged, China is engaged in a frenzied build-up in its military infrastructure and capabilities in the region. Nirav, what do you think this is? I mean, this is a case of diplomacy paying off, or do you think that we should tread carefully and not take it complacently?
Okay, so a couple of things. One is that this terrain in the winter gets terribly cold, right? So there is like really a good, sensible thing for both sides to disengage. But it's a classic prisoner's dilemma problem where if one side moves out and the other side doesn't, etc., then you could see encroachment by the other side. So as you said, this is a good diplomatic solution. I think China has a lot going on its plate. It has like a lot of tensions. Their focus is on Taiwan. The Chinese population doesn't really care about India and would not even be able to place these places on the map. Whereas India is quite reasonably populated, though not that much. Even Ladakh is fairly sparsely populated. India has like a large population center along, like say, UP, Bihar, near the Chinese border, near Nepali border, Uttarakhand, etc. Right? Uh, so that's the other thing. I think basically the solution for all of this is going to be diplomatic and in like the global diplomacy, right? I think India has kind of a little bit of a slight, if I would say, upper hand. I think a lot of the world is a little bit anti-China right now, but China flexes a lot of muscles due to the sheer power of its economy, right? So, yeah, I think it's a sensible solution. I would say that you can't really call it a victory or anything for either side, and who knows? Next April, May, we could see some other things, right? So, I think as we get closer to the winter, we are in September, probably after November to April or something, it's like really uninhabitable. India has posted that Siachen glacier, so Indian troops are battle hardened, but I think for either side, just the cost and the logistics, etc., is way too expensive in terms of human cost as well as like actual monetary cost, right? So I just think it's a sensible thing. Diplomacy has kind of called a stalemate, and both sides have kind of de-escalated, so it's a good thing for all.
Right, but we had also discussed earlier that there could be some kind of a flare up in the build up to the elections, right? In October. Yeah, so
Seems so right now. It seems I think people are a lot more focused about like the rolling lockdowns in China, and like you are seeing lockdowns in like a very large city, Chengdu, which is near the southeast part of Tibet, near northeastern India. You're seeing a lot of like rolling lockdowns in different places. I think COVID, consolidation of power in Beijing, and tensions in Taiwan, etc., tensions with the US on trade. I think those are all the primary kind of focus areas, right, for China. So even for China, it kind of makes sense to de-escalate on this side, have lesser issues. They also have like a drought. So China is having its own set of problems, and for them, it kind of makes sense. And to be frank, people really don't care, and people don't really elect the leaders. It's the Communist Party leaders who, the Politburo, which elects the leaders. So let's see, 16th October is their National Party Congress. So yeah.
all right. Staying with the thread of national security and defense, a Bloomberg report claims that India is now running out of weapons due to the Make in India policy. The report quotes officials with knowledge of the matter within quotes, stating that the push to boost domestic manufacturing is leaving India vulnerable to persistent threats from China and Pakistan. Stating that India can no longer import some critical weapons systems, the sources state that the push for manufacturing risks leaving India critically short of helicopters by 2026 and short of 100 fighter jets by 2023. The report went on to state that, to quote, "Make in India for defense isn't thought through properly, and that there isn't much to show for it except a good slogan." Well, Abhishek, even if we were to, superimpose on this the fact that, hey, I mean, there could be some vested interests that might actually benefit from India not pursuing the indigenous route, right? I mean, is there something to it?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for us as laymen to say exactly what is the right balance, right? So clearly, under this government, we have decided that it's important to be self-reliant in the long run, right? And self-reliance in terms of weaponry and missiles, and this defense area is definitely probably the most strategic initiative any country could take, and therefore you know banning of certain weapons of various types, right, is like giving a leg up or a sort of incentive for domestic defense manufacturers to step up. Now, it is quite possible that while they may be doing more, it may not be adequate, right? If you recall, I think earlier this year, we had discussed about this whole reform of uh, India's government-owned defense manufacturing companies, right? There was a large-scale sort of consolidation into, I think, 3 or 4 companies and all that. So, I mean, definitely reforms are happening on some end, but it is also possible that there may be, short-term sort of lack of supply or some sort of depletion of inventory. As you said, it is also possible that this story has inputs from defense manufacturers who would rather India continue with its older policy of importing much more. One of the things India has also been saying is that India welcomes foreign manufacturers to set up shop within India, right, and manufacture within India. So yeah, that's also something to be seen, how things work out on that front. But yeah, I mean, this is also one of those stories, right, where it's kind of easy to create panic as well, right, where because defense of the country is not something where people would like that the government is taking a lot of risk, but in the long run, self-sufficiency is basically the only way forward, right? Because you never know in a war, right? What happens if your uh, uh, allies or the countries that you rely on, take the other side, right? And we are going to discuss the whole F-16 Pakistan-related discussion later in the show, right? So, there's always two sides of this, and so it'll be interesting to watch out for. Perhaps the government might come up with a clarification if they think this situation or this story is creating some issues as well. So something to watch out for.
No, it's a hard challenge, right? I mean, it's one of those short-term pain, long-term gain sort of measures, if you ask me, right? I mean, the defense acquisition plan and so on, right? I mean, I think the majority of the problem is with the air capabilities that we have, right? I mean, so just reading from the report, it says by 2030, the Indian Air Force may be left with less than 30 fighter squadrons, well below the 42 that we need, right? And HAL can, at this point...
One more thing is like the massive politicization of every major arms purchase, right? Like we saw how the whole Rafale non-scandal was made into a major story, right? And so, I mean, defense purchase is often riddled with all this, right? So people are often trying to do defense purchase like they would purchase raw materials for a normal manufacturing organization, right? There is like people are saying, should we just go for an L1 kind of a thing? I mean, there are certain things where the political will is definitely needed, and while the government has been pretty steadfast on this, but this whole politicization of major arms purchases takes a toll as well, right, in terms of the speed of decision making or even future such purchases, right? People become quite wary, right, of those kind of things.
Yeah. No, but I think the government has also done its bit to sort of fast track some of these things, right? I mean, if you look at the position of Chief of Defense Staff, right, the former General Bipin Rawat was the almost a secretary rank reporting to the NSA and Prime Minister Modi, right? I mean, all of these were done to sort of fast track some of these things. And also, I think, see, Make in India is a misnomer here, right? Because I think if you look at the Defense Acquisition Council, they've laid out 3 or 4 types of procurement, right? One is to buy projects outright, right? The other is to buy and make projects, which is you buy a licensed, whatever aircraft or whatever it is, and then you figure out some kind of indigenous development of that ecosystem, right? Whether it's spare parts or servicing or whatever. And the final thing is to make projects, which is indigenously produced and designed here in India, right? So I think we have to qualify that as well. Also, I mean, you can't rule out all of these stories being seeded by those who have certain vested interests as well, right? I mean, there's certainly a lot of money at stake, and certainly there are people who can gain from this, right? I only feel that, the journalism could be a little more responsible, right? Especially when you're writing about national security matters, to write in the way that, forget about Bloomberg. I think, they just published a report, and also, I mean, foreign media is what it is, but the Indian Indian newspapers, media has just picked this up like verbatim and published some of this stuff with a little bit of editorializing, right? So yeah, I mean, I think it calls for a little more responsibility on that front, I think. Moving on, Queen Elizabeth II has died aged 96 after reigning for 70 years. Queen Elizabeth II's tenure as head of state spanned post-war austerity, the transition from empire to Commonwealth, and the end of the Cold War. Her reign spanned 15 prime ministers, starting with Mr. Winston Churchill and including Miss Truss, the newly appointed Prime Minister of the UK. Her son, now King Charles, and his wife Camilla, now Queen Consort, addressed the nation from Buckingham Palace on Friday, where he vowed lifelong service to the nation. Nirav, there was plenty of reactions, left to right, all across the board on Twitter and elsewhere. But what is Queen Elizabeth's legacy?
Yeah, so I think, see, what Queen Elizabeth has done is, if you actually see, you will not remember any sort of a memorable speech or any sort of a strong stand which she took, right? Because she actually played the role of like the royals, she relinquished power to the parliament and the prime minister, and she basically was the titular figurehead, which what UK is a constitutional monarchy, it is. Kind of by always being in the background, she kept people together. I think there's a lot of, in the UK, though I'm not, I don't understand why, but in the UK, she has a lot of support, there are a lot of royalists, etc., right? So kind of maintained decorum. I think, see, there is the whole TV series about her, The Crown. So that talks about her life, and she's had a long life, right? Like 96 years of age. She's also like a very accidental monarch. When she was born, she was very far away from the line to the throne. But her uncle wanted to marry the Hollywood actress Wallis Simpson, who was a divorcee. So that is why he relinquished his seat to the throne. And then her father, who was King George VI, became a king. And he passed away at a younger age in 1952. So that's why she came on to the throne. And she's been there for 70 years. They just had her platinum jubilee in like large celebrations. So that is there. She's been through like a lot of controversy, etc. as well. And so to put it that way, her legacy is, I think, about keeping things together, continuity, and always being like present in the background, right? Even her pictures are always seen, right? She's been waving from the balcony of the Buckingham Palace, etc. But rarely have you heard like a strong speech or like her taking like a very big stand. So that is that. But as in, she's played the role, what is expected out of her, and she's done that. And like, despite like a lot of smaller controversies, right? She sailed through all of it peacefully. India has actually so apart from being like the titular head of UK, she's also head of a few of the Commonwealth countries, which consider her as their constitutional head. Australia and Canada, Jamaica being some of them. You have India also declaring like a holiday on like 11th of September. And then this has got a lot of backlash, right, today. So now thing is, one is it is a Sunday. Two is, while India was a colony, there was a lot of extractive policies which are done even before. But UK has been like what do you say, like a monarchy, but with parliament having power since like elected leaders having power since 1215, right? Like almost 800 years ago. And so whatever that was there was also part of it was East India Company, part of it was the parliament and those prime ministers. And so you shouldn't be blaming her for sins of, say, her forefathers. Second thing is, India is trying to sign an FTA with the UK. India is trying to build bridges and have friends. So if a head of state passes away in another country, it's like in that way, like a goodwill gesture, right? So I think I would just take it as at that value, right? Because so that is there. And finally, now we've got King Charles III, as he would be called. And he comes to the throne at the age of 73, the oldest monarch, and he's waited the longest. So that's going to be interesting. he will probably want to. He's been a little more vocal on things like climate change and urban design, etc. He's always been a little more vocal about his views. So let us see if he changes his the way the monarchy was being run, and what he actually does, which charity causes does he choose to support, etc. Right? So that will be very interesting. And yeah, I think, see, it is uh, like the president of India has just titular powers. I think the Queen also just has like titular powers. So it's just what it is, and uh, all credit to her for going through like a lot of change and turbulence. And she could have abdicated the throne if she wanted to, but she chose not to. And there's like a nice continuity. So that's very interesting. And yeah, may her soul rest in peace.
Yeah, she was 96, but then she was still, discharging some of her stately duties, right? I mean, in fact, a couple of days before she passed, she had also met the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, as well. Yeah, so a couple of things to add to whatever you said. One is that I think, a lot of the foreign policy, we can't solve it like Twitter fights and Twitter debates, right? I mean, it's, I heard ridiculous things that, hey, India should just not bother about it, or, everything ranging from colonial legacy to whatever was thrown. Return the Kohinoor, all of that stuff. I mean, it's just nonsense. I mean, the UK is a modern nation, right? And we need to deal with the UK, right? We've just overtaken them as the fifth largest economy right now. And any kind of signaling from us is going to be helpful, right? I mean, you're not going to win by badgering the people that you want to negotiate with. Absolutely, right? And Prime Minister Truss has also acknowledged the fact that India has moaned as well, right? So I think some of this stuff is best relegated to Twitter, I suppose, right? Foreign policy has to have a modicum of like restraint, and that's a good thing. And the second, in terms of this whole colonial legacy and whatnot, right? I mean, I think, yes, we should never forget, but we should also, recognize the fact that the modern nation of UK is different, right? I mean, it's a different entity in that sense, right? And we should learn to deal with them, right? And we should use it very wisely, right? But the fact that, I mean, you're going to hold these people against, for whatever that, maybe like 4 generations, 5 generations, or 10 generations back did, is not going to serve us any good, right? I mean, especially considering that there are so many mutual overlaps now with the FTA coming up later this year and stuff. So yeah. All right. Moving on. Reversing President Trump's changes, President Biden has approved a $450 million F-16 fighter jet fleet program to Pakistan. The reasoning for this was to, quote, sustaining Pakistan's capability to meet current and future counterterrorism threats. The proposed sale does not include any new capabilities, weapons, or munitions, instead providing life cycle maintenance and sustainment packages for US origin platforms such as the F-16s. This is the first major security assistance to Pakistan after Trump in 2018 had announced to stop all defense and security assistance to Pakistan, alleging that Islamabad was not a partner in its fight against terrorism. Abhishek, does Pakistan use F-16 for anti-terrorism activities?
Yeah, so quite a funny sort of reasoning given. But the fact is that from a US point of view, it is in their interest, right, that the F-16s remain functioning in a sort of capable manner, right? Because ultimately, any usage of these high-tech, high-end aircrafts are basically also advertisements for future sales, right? And so, for example, if you recall the whole incident after Balakot, right? Like there was this whole talk of whether India did or did not shoot down one of their F-16s, and so it was like a big story of where Pakistan was trying to show pictures of their inventory of aircraft, saying that everything is intact and all that. So yeah, I mean, I think number one is the thing that the US and probably Lockheed Martin would like the F-16s to remain functional and in good condition for as long as possible. Secondly, I mean, I don't know if there is some sort of signaling being done to India about the whole, India's stance with regard to the Ukraine-Russia war. I don't know. Like, obviously, the US has officially commented that in the India is free to take its position and all that, but possible that the Biden administration is kind of uh, gently or probably uh, covertly signaling to India that look, we can always start or restart our partnership with Pakistan. So yeah, kind of interesting development here.
It's also an interesting coincidence that this is coming in after Ayman al-Zawahiri was killed, right? And which followed the ISI chief Nadeem Anjum's visit to Washington. So all of this kind of coincidence of coincidences, like a series of coincidences happening, and the US famously says, right, there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. So obviously, I mean, this is in return for something.
So just adding a couple of things, right? I think Pakistan has given like a little bit of small symbolic aid to Ukraine in terms of some weapons. India has been buying Russian oil. So that's also something. So kind of like trying to play. So US is also trying to play off like these two nations, etc. And I think to be fair, the Pakistani generals do very well for themselves, given like the size of their economy. They leverage their geographical location, and they played off two large powers, China and US, quite well. So it's maybe it helps the Pakistani army, probably not the Pakistani population, but so yeah, they have kind of used their leverage quite well, given the fact that their economy isn't like that big a leverage for them.
Yeah, it's pretty sad at one level, right? That Pakistan is kind of reduced to being an attack dog of the US and China, right? And as you mentioned, I think the generals and the army seem to do well, but what about the population, right? I mean, given the recent disasters that we've seen, both on the in the floods as well as the economy crumbling as well. Yeah. All right. Moving on. In some sad news, ex-Tata chairman Cyrus Mistry died earlier this week, prompting newfound interest in seatbelt laws in India. The businessman was killed in a car accident in Maharashtra's Palghar last Sunday, along with Mr. Mistry, Jahangir Pandole, Anahita Pandole, and Darius Pandole were present in the car. Union Transport Minister Nitin Gadkari has stepped in, emphasizing the need to follow rules, especially the seatbelt regulations. The government is also in talks with car makers to introduce 6 airbags, as well as making seatbelt alarms for the backseat mandatory. Nirav, this is pretty sad news, right?
Yeah. So one thing is like it's a very, very sad news. Like Cyrus Mistry, only 54, was also like earlier chairman of Tata, but also was running the Shapoorji Pallonji, like the construction business, that arm. And like this is like completely avoidable tragic death. And you had so one thing is like about road safety is you've seen a lot of improvement on Indian roads, but in patches. So the cars can go up to at a very high speed in certain patches, and then they have to decelerate. There has been a very insightful article about like the area being accident prone because just ahead the flyover, it splits into a V. So the car had to swerve a bit, and then the width suddenly from a wider road becomes narrower. So there's an L shape. So basically, you have to like come into the lanes have to merge. So maybe better road marking, maybe continuous widening, and not having these small bottlenecks here and there. Because what has happened is that on the better stretches, the cars can go very fast, but speed of any system or the throughput is basically the bottleneck. So I think while the road transport ministry has done a very good job on like highways, Mumbai to Ahmedabad stretch is part of the other expressway being constructed, like Mumbai to Baroda to Delhi, right? So I think we need like a tolled expressway as well, right? So kind of we need additional capacity. And then finally, as you mentioned, it's about also better awareness of safety. So one is airbags in the rear, and a lot of people did not know that airbags are not activated till like the seatbelt is fastened, right? So wearing seat belts, not just for the front seat, also for the rear seats, right? So a lot of these things have to come in. We all have to be a little more aware. It's so sad that such a tragic death has led to like people getting a little more aware of this thing. And now the marginal cost, the cost of airbags in a car is not that high compared to the cost of car itself. If it is given as a default or regulations make it mandatory, right? So I think all new cars having airbags, etc., would avoid that. But as I said, we need to avoid the accident in itself in the first place. And if an accident happens, how to ensure safety of the passengers, right? So a lot of thought has to go through, but we are improving in an incremental fashion. I think we have to continue this whole process of improvement and increase road safety. And like last year, I don't know the case. I've driven on this road a few times, and it's one of the very highly packed corridors from Mumbai to Palghar to like Surat to Baroda to like Ahmedabad, right? It's a lot of big cities are on the way. It's a very packed corridor. And we also need some laws on like lane discipline on these highways with a lot of trucks told to stay on the left, etc. Right? Because rash lane changing can also lead to accidents. So I think that is something that is needed. So yeah, it's just a lot more awareness, a lot more improving bottlenecks, better signage, better lane markers that you know that the lane is merging, right? So I think a lot of that is needed. And finally, in the cars itself, a little more emphasis on safety by the passengers and the drivers, etc.
Yeah, it's sad that something like this had to lead to all of those things being in focus again, right? I mean, all safety standards and everything, but better late than never, I guess. Speaking about Mr. Mystery, Sonali Jaitley Bakshi, who is the former Minister Arun Jaitley's daughter, had penned a very nice tribute about him, talking about the kind of person he was, very affable, very personable, right? Incidentally, Sonali was part of the legal team, his legal team, and seems like a person who was kind of down to earth, right? Even though, given that he was at the helm of two major industrial families, right? I mean, both Shapoorji Pallonji and the Tata entity, right? Hey, before we move on, I think the Queen's death sort of overshadowed the fact that we have a new Prime Minister in the UK. Right. So, Neerav, what do you make of Liz Truss?
Oh, yeah, sure. So, a couple of things. So, Liz Truss is also like quite a polarizing figure in the UK because as a student, earlier she was part of like the Liberal Democrats. The LDP is the third party after like the Conservatives and the Labour, right? Then she moved towards the Conservatives. Then in 10 years ago, 2012, she had said like an article about like Free Britannia and have like very much like free trade, open trade, and like going towards a laissez-faire economy, etc. Right? Less regulations. So very, very right wing on like economics. She was first she was anti-Brexit, but once the voters' mandate came in, she switched tack, saying that yes, like now, given that the people's mandate has to be respected, so she said, okay, let's work on getting out of the EU, etc. Now, lastly, while she said about what she said 10 years ago was in a different world, in a different context, she's coming in as a prime minister at one of the most fragile times with high energy costs, a lot of worries about a recession, very high inflation in the UK. So she and her Treasury, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, as they call them, as they call their finance minister, is a Nigerian origin person, and they've come up with a plan to cap utility bills in the UK And this is very much an interventionist and a kind of more fiscal spending, what you would expect maybe from the Labour government. But what this says is she's a pragmatic person. This is what I wanted to highlight, that at different points in time, you should not be judged by the choices you made, because they were at a different time in a different world under different circumstances, right? So that is one thing. What I think there's going to be continuity in the policy towards India. Her closest competitor was Rishi Sunak, whose wife still holds Indian citizenship and whose in-laws are living in India right now. And he's of Indian origin. So obviously would be a little bit different. But I think the continuity remains from Boris Johnson's policies. We are probably about to sign an FTA pretty soon. So that will happen. But I think her focus right now is very much domestic. Go through the winter with the shortages of gas, energy rationing, and trying to cap bills, which the utility companies can draw down on loans. So there's a lot of it. A lot of it is accounting jugglery as well, which is the subsidies are given as loans by banks, and the banks have like a government guarantee. So trying to like keep it off balance sheet, so that UK's debt to GDP is also rising quite a bit. So she's coming in at a very tough time. It is a crown of thorns. And in terms of popularity, the Labour Party is rising. The Labour leader, Keir Starmer, is being more popular than any of the Conservative leaders, right? So that is that. It remains to be seen how she navigates through these tough times. But yeah, wish her all the best. And in terms of politics, the Conservative Party, no matter who the leader, is a little bit more pro-India versus the Labour Party. We had the talk with the Conservative Friends of the Commonwealth, Sunil Sharma as well. So he highlighted this part as well. And yeah, so I think she is a capable leader, having been the foreign secretary. Obviously, she put Britain's interests first. She was earlier critical about India buying Russian energy, oil. And her remarks were rebutted by S. Jaishankar as well, right? That Europe buys more in an afternoon than India bought in the early part of 2022. But I believe she's a sensible leader, and like when the facts change, she changes her mind. So that's a good quality to have in a leader. Though like her opponents are saying that she's changing track quite often, but I think it's just a sensible thing to do given the circumstances.
Yeah, it's a crown of thorns, no less, right? I mean, with energy prices, going up and stuff. We'll probably do a follow-up with Sunil of the CFOC on, everything that's happened in the UK. And certainly there's a lot, right, that has happened. So do stay tuned for that. Meanwhile, we have a couple of fascinating episodes coming up. I spoke to K. Sudarshan, who is the managing director of EMA Partners, which is an exec search firm in India, perhaps the top 5 here, right? And also Abhishek Asthana, who you guys may know as @Gabbar Singh on Twitter. He's a social media influencer and also an entrepreneur. We spoke about the state of work. What's changed post COVID. What are the attitudes of some of the younger professionals towards work? Is remote work here to stay? Work from home, work from office, all of those things, right? I mean, it was a fairly free-flowing conversation. We spoke about some of the comments that were made by, let's say, Rishad Premji, the chairman of Wipro, on moonlighting, about from Shantanu Deshpande of the Bombay Shaving Company on how hard you should work, so on and so forth. Do check it out. We're going to put this out this week. We also have an upcoming episode with Shaunak Agarkhedkar, sorry. And he is, a spy thriller writer. So he's got a series of 3 books, right? Let Bhutto Eat Grass. I think the 3rd one has come out. The 3rd one or 4th one has just come out, and we're going to be talking to him soon. Fascinating stuff again. So yeah, plenty of good content coming up. Don't forget to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platforms. It helps more people discover our content. From Abhishek, Neerav, and myself, until next week, do stay safe, take care, and Jai Hind.